Hi, I think we're live.
Hey,
Yeah, hi
super.
everyone. Welcome to our first official Testkube Office Hours, where we'll be opening our virtual office doors to you. I'm Ale, developer advocate at Testkube. If you're new here, Testkube is a Kubernetes native testing framework that helps you orchestrate, execute, and display tests and test results for your apps running under Kubernetes. Today, I am joined by Bruno, our product leader. Hi, Bruno. Want to say hi?
Hey guys, nice to be here.
Where are you based? Tell us.
So I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal,
Nice, nice,
but
nice.
right now I'm in Dubai for a few weeks.
Cool, cool. Okay, thank you. So, before jumping right in, I want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of our office hours are and about how frequently we'll host them. The purpose of these office hours is to answer our community's questions about TestCube, update you on where we're at, what we're doing, where we're headed, and why, and also shed light on important topics and trends in the testing and Kubernetes space. However, we do want to make this entirely for you. So feel free to ask questions at any point or request any topic you'd like for us to discuss. We'll be hosting office hours twice a month. And if you have anything you'd like for us to talk about, feel free to bring it up in the comments or through our Discord server. And so today, our agenda will cover a little bit of an intro to everything and some of our most frequently asked questions, as well as explain what kinds of problems we're trying to fix here at TestCube. Are you ready, Bruno? So that we can just dive right into it?
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can start with the most basic stuff, maybe taking a few steps back to discuss why it's important to test our apps in Kubernetes, because I know that testing in general is sometimes very overlooked, like in general, right, in software development.
Mhm.
But how does it affect us when we transition to Kubernetes? How does that affect testing? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how testing is done right now, or what are some of the trends that you've observed?
Definitely. So there are several things to unpack there. There are in the transition to Kubernetes that when the companies they used more traditional approaches and more monolithic services, and when they are transitioning into microservices, Kubernetes, and all the trendy tools that you know, there's an issue there, which is the know-how. Is they are using new tools, things that they are not used to doing yet. Everything is new, and they feel like sometimes they don't have the knowledge. And when something is unknown, and it's harder to perceive the value of the immediate value, something is left behind, and that is testing. Is every company has a lot of priorities to do. Everything like needs to be done very fast, and there's a lot of priorities. And sometimes people see testing as not a big priority on the short term, because you say, okay, I'm going to do tests, and then you do them, and then nothing changes, right? But you do testing for the future, thinking about the future and problems that you don't want to happen. So yeah, that's a trend that I'm seeing. It's like some teams transition to Kubernetes, but they don't test the apps that are running there. They do unit tests like they did in the past, and then they transition to new ways, and they don't also evolve the testing aspect of it.
Yeah, I've seen that too. You kind of overlook that even more, and you no longer care about what's going on, or actually don't have the ability. You think that you don't have the ability anymore to test whatever is running in your clusters, right? And so, talking specifically about TestCube, how does it work in comparison to the trend that we're seeing right now that people just do unit testing? How does TestCube come into the game?
Yeah, so Testkube is very well suited for, especially for companies that still don't know that know-how of testing Kubernetes and are just making the transition, or even companies that do, but they don't want to spend so much resources maintaining those tests and infrastructure. Testkube. So what Testkube does is, as you mentioned at the beginning, is for test and developers. So anyone that wants to run tests and test applications that are running in Kubernetes, you can have Testkube basically doing that execution and orchestration for you in a way that is very simple. most of the old companies that are doing tests in Kubernetes, when you talk with them, they tell us, oh, in the past we had to build a custom solution for this because we didn't have a tool like Kubernetes to do this for us. So we had to build it internally. And you can imagine that only big companies have the resources and know-how and all of that to do such a custom solution. If you are a company that's just starting with Kubernetes and the company didn't make already a big investment, you won't be able to do that, right? So you need to use something that already exists, and especially like a open source tool like Testkube that allows you just to quickly define the tests in Kubernetes, quickly run them, see them in the UI or the CLI, have a single pane of glass into all your tests that are running there. It's a very useful tool.
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit, you already answered a little bit this question, but how do I know if Testkube is for me?
Mm-hmm.
How can I tell?
So it's a good question. I think the best way to answer it is to ask a different one. Is like, do you feel that you need to test your applications? Do you want to have more observability and to understand if the application is behaving correctly as you intended to? Are you having issues with the quality of your software? If that's the case, if you are having issues with quality, or you feel like you need to test more, or you feel like testing is a hurdle, or test automation and execution also, you don't have people with the know-how to do that in a custom way, you just want to use a tool that works out of the box, then it's for you. You just want to run tests, right? So anyone that wants to see tests running can use Testkube.
Perfect. We already have a couple questions. I think we can just answer those. Let me see if I can show it. Yeah, so we got this question that we actually get asked a lot. Can I use Testkube to test Kubernetes itself, like why pods or deployments are failing?
It's an excellent question. So anything that you can test, anything you can use any testing tool. What the way Testkube runs tests is it takes your test files, can be from a Git repo, your computer, anywhere. It takes a container with dependencies needed to run that test. Those dependencies and the way you package them is in something that we call executors. Is the thing that is going to execute your tests, and then runs in Kubernetes as a Kubernetes shell. Inside Kubernetes, you can test anything. You can test your applications. You can test other Kubernetes endpoints. So yes, you can test Kubernetes itself if you want to. And the second question I see there is understanding why pods and why deployments and pods are failing. So yeah, you basically you can see your tests. For example, if a service is done and is making API requests, that application will not be able to answer those requests and the test will fail. So you can test for things like that.
Yeah. We have another question. With the JMeter regarding the JMeter artifact. By the way, we just added that. Check out our release notes. This is a new executor that we just integrated. But the question is, in JMeter artifact, we only have JTL format. Can we add HTML reports?
Yes, we can. So it's a good point. We just released the JMeter executor last week, right? It was a 1.7 release. So we can make additions to it. It's open source. Please open an issue with the kind of artifact that you want to use, and we can just make that addition to the executor.
Okay, so going back to what we were talking about, thank you for the questions, by the way. Going back to what we were talking about, and related also to what you just said. So a question that we always get is, can we run any type of test in Testkube? So maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into that.
Mm-hmm. Any type of test. So yes, there's two ways of the way you can run a type of tool. Testkube comes out of the box with already with support for a lot of tools that we see. What were the tools that were most common from people, and the most requested, and we build that as first. So we support Cypress, Postman, Key6, JMeter now, and we are building them and adding them out of the box for Testkube as we see that the people we see what are the most common requests, and then we add them. And then we also provide the way for people to create them for themselves in a very easy manner and very fast. And the way you can do that is something that we call custom container executors, which is you just need to create a container, which is like a Docker image, can be made from a Docker file, with all the dependencies that you will need. For example, if it's a test that is based in Python, you will build just a Python Docker image with a Python Docker file with all your dependencies. And then that's it. You would define that executor in Testkube as my Python executor. And then, like you are going to upload your Python files to that Python executor, which is going to run those Python tests in Testkube. So either you can use testing tools that are supported out of the box, or very easily you can add that support yourself.
Perfect. We have another question. How can we check trigger logs in Testkube?
Is that triggers? We have a feature that's called test triggers. So it's a feature that you can define what is like what triggers tests. So you can listen for events and then trigger tests, or you can trigger it from CI/CD or yourself. So I'm not sure to what this question relates to, if it's like from the first example or the last one. But I can answer both, I guess. So for the latest one, you can check the logs of Testkube server, and you can see basically when tests are being scheduled. And then for the first functionality, basically you just see the tests being run. So the tests are being run automatically, and you should just see that behavior happening in the platform.
Yeah, I hope we answered your question, but let us know if not, so we can address it again. Thank you, Pankaj. And going back to the main topic and how to get started. So let's assume that I'm a company that just transitioned into Kubernetes, and I want to test. So I know I want to get started with Testkube, but what are the next steps to get started with Testkube?
I think the best way to get started with Testkube is just try it out. If you just want to see how it works visually, you can go to our website. We have a demo environment where you can just use the UI and just click around and see basically the visual functionalities. And then, like after that, it's very easy. You can just install our CLI. You can install it, for example, on a Minikube installation on your computer, and quickly just give it a shot and see upload the test or anything that we use. I think that's the best way to get started, is just to understand how it fits to your use case. And then after that, I think you just deploy it to one of your environments. For example, the company has a testing environment, a development environment where people have their code there running and use it for testing. You should deploy your Testkube there. And then, just plug it into your existing CI/CD pipeline. And that's it.
So do you think you can talk a little bit about how the complete setup of our CI/CD pipeline would be to start testing with Testkube?
Yes. You can use so Testkube lives in your cluster, the orchestrator of tests. So you can trigger tests by doing API calls. The API calls can come from the UI, right? When you are using the UI, the interface, when you click run, underneath there's an API call being made to the Testkube server that triggers that execution. You can use a CLI, or you can make API calls directly by HTTP requests. So in the CI/CD process, for example, if you use GitHub Actions, you can use the Testkube action that exists in the marketplace, for example. Or if you use any kind of other CI/CD system like Jenkins, GitLab CI, Circle CI, anything else, I think the easiest way is to use our CLI there, configured, and pointing to the cluster that you want to test in the pipeline. And then, for example, if you have a step that let's say like run test is one step in your pipeline. You'd say Testkube, which is a CLI, Testkube CLI run my test suites, my test suite A or B, and then what that does in your pipeline is going to make a call to the Testkube server. Testkube server is going to run that test for you, and then it's going to reply with if it passed or not. So then your pipeline will fail if your tests fail or pass. So if you do it that way, in a way that you want to integrate it in your pipeline in a synchronous way, you can do it by using the RCLI there. But there are also other ways you might want to use it. For example, if you want to Testkube to run things by themselves, so Testkube can listen for cluster events. When things get deployed, Testkube can run tests for you automatically. You can schedule tests. So for example, you say, I want a test to run every day at midnight. You can do that, configure that. And yeah, also something I forgot to point out first, it's a good everything in Testkube, like the definitions are YAML definitions. They are Kubernetes resources, so it's a Kubernetes-native testing tool. So it's good that you save those YAMLs in a GitHub repo or whatever, GitLab as well, and Git repo. And that is the source of truth. So we encourage people to follow a GitHub's methodology, let's say, where Git is kind of the source of truth for everything. Then you can use that. You can deploy it to your cluster, and then your cluster is always in sync with what is happening in your Git repo.
Okay, and is there support that there might be offered if I'm a company and I want to get started? How would that work?
It's an excellent question. So you can use our Discord channel. We have a Discord channel where the community is involved, and people ask questions and everybody answers. The team, even other members of the community, go there and answer questions and ask questions. So that's one way. Also, we have paid support. So companies that need a stronger SLAs and need like a dedicated support and more resources, we also have that offering as well. So reach out to us if that's the case. But I mean, if you are just getting started, probably the quickest way is go to our Discord channel and post a question.
Yes, our engineers are super responsive, super helpful. So if you have any type of issue, don't hesitate to reach out. And going to the present state of Testkube, we just had a release last week, a lot of new features. So can you maybe summarize a little bit of where Testkube is right now?
Mm-hmm. Testkube right now it's really focusing on making the covering most cases in a testing scenario for people. We are trying to be even every release more compatible with more tools. For example, this one was JMeter, and with more use cases. For example, in this release we introduced abort and timeouts. So people ask they want the test to be timeouted after a few times because their tests they can get stuck and they can left running for a long time, and you don't want that. And Kubernetes by default, no, it's harder to configure that. So we allow you to configure that in Testkube. And our current state is that one. We want to be plug and play and very adaptable to your use case. Basically, 80% of use cases should be done out of the box. So that's the current state. We are also building. Maybe I can talk about the future as well, like where we are.
Throw it in.
So we also started building Testkube Cloud, which is a hosted offering of Testkube open source. You can see it like the same thing is Testkube open source, but also in the cloud, where you don't have to worry about managing your database or other things that need to be deployed to your cluster. You just use Testkube Cloud to orchestrate and execution, orchestrate your tests and see everything that's happening in your cluster in the cloud. So it gets even easier to get started with Testkube at your company.
Perfect. And about Testkube opens, what features or what's next for Testkube open source?
Yeah, we are going next to try to take more advantages advantages of the capabilities of Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is very good at scale, at parallelization, and at running big amount of workloads. So we have a lot of users that have requirements where they just want to run hundreds of tests at the same time in different nodes in the cluster. And CI/CD systems are not made for that, and they are not very good at doing that. And especially in testing environments, CI/CD systems are not made for testing at all, like out of the box. So they are using Testkube for that. And Testkube really shines because it uses the Kubernetes schedule to orchestrate that. And next for Testkube is to be even more scalable, where we are going to allow people to create test suites that you can with test inside, where you can parallelize all the execution. So you can basically add a lot of logic to your testing scenarios when they are very complex. And like by nature they are complex, but in Testkube we try to make it easier. So you just visually can just do quickly in a way that you can run complex things in a simple manner.
And a question regarding like adoption and everything. How easy or how simple would you say that it is for a team to get on board with Testkube if they don't have a lot of knowledge about Kubernetes or how everything's working?
Yeah, so if you are using Kubernetes and you have deployed the Kubernetes, usually I guess assume like somebody in your company deployed Kubernetes for you and did that. So the same person will deploy Testkube in that Kubernetes cluster, and then you don't need that person is like that is it, the amount of knowledge you need from Kubernetes. Then you can just use Testkube, you can use the UI, and you can use it basically to create a test, to call them. You might, if you want to integrate with your CI/CD, you might be also need to use a CLI and be comfortable using a CLI and comments. But that is like if you want to go into automated CLI. If you are just a tester that just want to run things, you can just use the UI and click on a few buttons to do that. So you don't really need any Kubernetes expertise to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. Do we have more questions? Let me see. Okay, so just maybe to close, what would you say is the way that Testkube help us, like to summarize, how does it help us tackle this problem of not being able to test our apps once they're running, under Kubernetes? Mm-hmm. Just to summarize.
Like if I could say it in a phrase, perhaps, we make complex things simple. It's testing. A lot of people don't do integration testing or end-to-end testing because they see it as more complex.
Yeah,
and it kind of is because they were not really, before we started doing this, there were really not a tool in this space. So it's where Testkube fits in. We try to make it like very easy, out of the box solutions where you can just do integration tests as easily as you are doing unit tests right now.
Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, I think the main advantage of Testkube, obviously besides, simplifying the way you do tests, is the way that you don't necessarily, like you mentioned in the last question that we answered, it's not necessary for you to be an expert with Kubernetes. You can just get onboarded easily as long as it's set up. And like, for example, our last release, 1.7, it translated most of our features to the UI. So it's even more friendly for people that are just there to test, right? They can just get to the point and don't have to worry about any complexity that is behind doors, But anyways, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you give Testkube a try and that we've answered some of our most frequently asked questions. Thank you also to the people that asked us questions in the chat. If you have any further questions for us, any feedback, any requests, we love hearing from you. So don't hesitate to ping us on social media, our Discord, or straight into Bruno's mailbox. I'll share the link of our Discord again. And office hours, like I said, will be happening twice a month. We will be covering different topics of interest related to Testkube. This time, we want to give an intro but we'll start getting more specific as we move forward, talking about Testkube features, testing, Kubernetes in general. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bruno?
Cool. Thank you. Thanks so much. See you next time, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.